Opening statements may be submitted for the record. We're pleased to have Commissioner Kevin McAleenan before us today to discuss a wide range of issues facing CBP. Commissioner McAleenan was sworn in on March 20th, 2018 as the 5th Commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Prior to his confirmation, Mr. McAleenan served as the acting commissioner since the beginning of this administration. As the agency's chief executive, Mr. McAleenan oversees 60,000 employees, manages a budget of over $13 billion, and ensures the effective operations of CBP's mission to protect national security while promoting economic prosperity. The witness's full written statement will appear in the record. The chair now recognizes Commissioner McAleenan for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman McSally, Ranking Member Vela. It was nice to see the full committee, Chairman McCall, as well as Ranking Member Thompson here, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. It's a privilege to speak to you about my priorities as Commissioner and to represent the nearly 60,000 strong men and women of U.S. Customs and Border Protection. The opportunity to lead and work alongside these men and women is the biggest privilege of my professional life. CBP is central to many priorities for the American people and the administration, from countering terrorism to enhancing border security to securing and facilitating trade and travel. Our dedicated officers and agents, specialists, pilots, and support personnel are relentlessly pursuing a more secure and economically competitive nation. My vision for CBP is that we aspire to become the most effective, most innovative, and most trusted and transparent law enforcement agency in the United States while remaining the premier border security and management agency in the world. During my tenure as CBP Commissioner, I'm committed to 5 overarching priorities: attracting, retaining, and developing the most qualified and resilient workforce to serve our nation and meet tomorrow's challenges; accelerating the adoption of innovative technologies to keep America and our people safe; building and strengthening partnerships across government and with international counterparts; transforming the ways that our stakeholders interact with CBP and our operations; and investing in our culture through unity of effort initiatives that further develop a common purpose and a mission commitment across all CBP's operational and support components. My written testimony submitted to the committee further elaborates CBP's ongoing efforts to enhance our security and strengthen our organization, keep our nation safe, and my priority strategies for continuing to improve. With the support of Congress to provide us the resources, authorities, and legislative changes we need, I believe that CBP will continue to make great strides across our core missions and in every area of our operations. We will also enhance our internal integrity programs and pursue transparency and professionalism measures that will help us increase and maintain the trust of the public we are sworn to serve. But even as we continue to enhance border security at and between ports of entry, increasing our effectiveness at identifying and interdicting threats, apprehensions of those crossing our border illegally or who are determined to be inadmissible at ports of entry continue to rise. Seizures of illicit hard narcotics are also increasing across all categories, both at and between ports of entry, especially methamphetamine and synthetic opioids like fentanyl. And as we strengthen our screening and vetting across multiple agencies to identify potential threats before they enter the United States, we continue to face a multifaceted and dispersed terrorist adversary. We need to continue to invest in and deploy critical capabilities to prevent and interdict illegal crossings between ports of entry, a modern border wall system, situational awareness sensors, airborne, mobile, and fixed, access and mobility, and mission readiness, our Border Patrol agents, pilots, and Air and Marine interdiction agents and support personnel. At our ports of entry, we need enhanced non-intrusive inspection equipment to detect deep concealments of drugs and CBP officers and agriculture specialists. For our trade enforcement mission, we will augment our dedicated and expert team with additional specialists, auditors, and attorneys. And we need to continue to build on our world-leading capabilities at the National Targeting Center and develop the new National Vetting Center, as well as supporting increased capacity for our international partners. But CBP is ultimately only one part of a much larger system, one that neither begins or ends at our borders. To address threats of illegal immigration and human smuggling, narcotics trafficking, and terrorism, we need to close legal loopholes in our immigration enforcement system, expand our investigative and interdiction reach, and strengthen international partnerships and policy alignment. Illegal and irregular immigration will continue at increasing levels unless the systemic vulnerabilities in our statutory regime are addressed. If only a small percentage of those border crossers apprehended by the Border Patrol in certain categories are effectively repatriated, others, drawn by a strong economy, the prospect of family reunification, and the promise of a successful crossing will continue to follow. These loopholes create a powerful magnet, draining energy and youth from Central America, even as we work to invest and partner in the security and prosperity of that neighboring region. They put children at risk of violence and assault. They enrich transnational criminal organizations, and they threaten the security of our international neighbors, and our domestic neighborhoods. The administration's legislative priorities on unaccompanied children and family units, asylum and credible fear, along with the requested investments in Central America and elsewhere, would help address these issues. I urge Congress to act on these priorities, and I look forward to working with members on both sides of the aisle to address these challenges. Border security is national security. It's a nonpartisan issue. With the ongoing support of Congress, CBP will continue to secure our nation's borders while facilitating international trade and travel. Our dedicated frontline workforce and our supporting team will ensure it. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. We have been working on closing these legal loopholes for a while, and I want to recognize that my bill, along with Chairman McCall and Goodlatte and Labrador, we address these issues. But for the public out there, the laymen, our constituents, maybe they don't understand what we're talking about, right? We're talking about how even if you have the will and the desire in order to secure the border, and with your CBP personnel and your Border Patrol agents, if you catch someone, you're able to swiftly be able to send them back, and then that deters others from coming, and then it also stops the profits of the cartels, that these loopholes do not allow that to happen. And we've referenced it today, but can you paint it in layman's terms what the issue is and how it's being exploited by these cartels? This caravan has gotten a lot of attention where there's a large group of people coming here. Many of them will also exploit these loopholes, but it's happening every single day in the communities along the border. So can you give you an opportunity to just talk through those and why it's so important that we in Congress close these loopholes so that you can do your job?
Sure. Thank you, Chairwoman. I'd be happy to talk through the loopholes. What we're facing at the border, and our sector chief in Rio Grande Valley, which is seeing about 50% of our apprehensions nationally, has invented a new term to address the increasing traffic. And you highlighted some of it in your opening statement. As opposed to 90% adults in a migrant workforce that we saw in the past, we're now seeing 40% kids and families crossing the border. He's taken to calling these populations non-impactables, meaning that there is no consequence, there's no response to an illegal entry for these groups. For unaccompanied children, I think you need only look at the disparity between Mexican nationals and children from Central America and further away. About 96% of Mexican unaccompanied children are returned within 3 years. That number drops to 3% for people from other countries. Essentially, once a Border Patrol agent apprehends them, and usually they're actually looking for a Border Patrol agent once they cross the border, they're taken into custody, processed, and quickly turned over via our partners at Immigration and Customs Enforcement to Health and Human Services, where they can be properly cared for. They are then have their sponsor vetted, and they're turned over by Health and Human Services to someone living in the United States, possibly illegally. So that's the process for an unaccompanied child. For a member of a family unit, if they're apprehended, and again, they're not always seeking to evade Border Patrol agents, sometimes they're picked up relatively routinely right at the borderline. They're turned over to ICE. ICE takes them to a family residential facility where they're processed and detained generally for less than 20 days. That's the expected standard due to court decisions in the Ninth Circuit. They're then released pending a court hearing, which could happen many years out. And in the meantime, they're living here with authorization to be employed. This is a real challenge because that first threshold of determining whether somebody might have a fear of returning to their country is very low. So a very high percentage gets that. But the ultimate court decision doesn't come for many years. So it creates a significant pull factor for others. And then the third category is adults that claim fear that also go through that asylum process and spend time here in between that initial determination of fear and that ultimate court decision, which could be many years out due to the significant backlog in our immigration courts. So for a Border Patrol agent on the border, they want to protect the American people from threats. They don't want to interdict and process people that are coming to claim asylum between ports of entry. It's not a good process. The status quo is not acceptable.
Thank you. I appreciate you expanding on that. I mean, the thing it's the insanity is that essentially the message is to any transnational criminal organization, or really anybody, just get your kid, just get to the border, look for someone, turn yourself in, say the right words, and then you can disappear into the interior of the United States, with a very small percentage showing up for their court date in the future, correct?
That is correct, and that's exactly right. The transnational criminal organizations are preying on these individuals. They're charging them $5,000 to $10,000 to smuggle them to the border and allow them to use their area of the border to cross. That enriches organizations that are threatening the security and safety of Mexican citizens, and it puts those children at risk of assault and violence in the process.
Thank you. And so, can you talk about the caravan then, and then I'll yield back, and we'll do another round. But can you talk about the caravan and how this is impacting? Where everyone's sort of watching this all happen with this big caravan, but this is happening every day in smaller numbers.
I think the caravan highlights the challenge that the loopholes present. If we don't have alignment in migration policy between countries, destination and transit countries, if we don't have a statutory regime that has loopholes closed, this invites groups like this to try to come to our border and come into the United States in this irregular fashion. So we're going to enforce the immigration law. We're going to absolutely treat claims of fear and protection fairly as we encounter this group, but it presents a challenge and just, I think, is highlighting publicly the issues that we're facing in the statutory regime.
Thank you. All right, yield back.